I'm Riley Reese. This is the Sophia Unfiltered podcast, where we bring together thought leaders, wellness entrepreneurs, makers, and emerging health leaders. We're here to have raw, unfiltered conversations because sharing your stories has the power to change lives, help others heal, and transform the way we take care of ourselves. Here we go. This episode contains discussion of suicide. If you or someone you know are experiencing suicidal thoughts, you can connect with a 24-hour suicide and crisis lifeline by dialing or texting 988. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Today on Sophia Unfiltered, we are talking to Sara Wilkinson. She is a Gold Star spouse and the founder of the Step Up Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to preventing veteran suicide. Sara's husband, Navy SEAL Chad Wilkinson, died by suicide in 2018 after struggling with the effects of traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder. After Chad's death, Sara was determined to do everything she could to help other veterans and their families who are struggling. She founded the Step Up Foundation in 2019 to raise awareness about veteran suicide and provide resources and support to veterans and their families. To date, they've donated over $1 million to research suicide. Sara is a passionate advocate for veterans and their families. She's spoken before Congress and at numerous events about the importance of preventing veteran suicide. In this episode, we talked to Sara about her personal journey, her work with the Step Up Foundation, and the challenges and opportunities facing veterans and their families today. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Sara Wilkinson to the show.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me on.
Hi, Sara. Thanks for joining us. We are so appreciative of your time. We're so appreciative to hear the story. We have so many listeners coming to Sophia Health looking for resources. And I know we have a jam-packed session here. So do you want to just start off and tell us whatever you'd like to share? Tell us about your experience, your story.
I guess to give sort of the highlight reel of my history that someone might not know the story, as was shared a few minutes ago, I married my high school sweetheart. We were both military kids. We met at a high school that was on base for military kids. They're called DOD schools, Department of Defense. We were together for 27 years. He was in the military, had a very vibrant career, incredible missions and stories and life experience. We have 2 children. And then, as mentioned, he died by suicide, pretty much shattering my life as I knew it. So at 41 years old, I lost 27 years of it. So he was my husband. He was the father of my kids. He was my best friend. I also lost my own identity, which I think should be noted. So it wasn't just the loss of your spouse, which for anyone who may not know, that is listed as one of the most traumatic life events someone can experience. And as most people, when you're married, you expect to live to be 80 or 90, and one of you would have to die first. But I call this an out of timeline death. We were very young. Not only did I lose him, the type of death was traumatic, but in addition to that, as a military spouse, and I can't speak for everyone, but many of us really identify with that role as well. We take a lot of pride in supporting our loved one in the military and the lifestyle that is, because it can be very challenging. We take a lot of pride in raising the kids and kind of being that stability when the service member is gone. And so I lost that sense of myself too. So as you can imagine, it did derail me and sent me in a tailspin. And, I'm not the only person to lose a spouse young. I'm not the only person to lose someone to suicide. Unfortunately, it's a very large number that when you talk to people, you might be surprised the ripple effect that suicide can create. It might not be someone's spouse. It could be a brother or a cousin or a neighbor. But I never really gave it much thought till my husband died. And then once I started talking to people, realizing how quickly this affects so many. And then I think what we'll probably get in talking to more today is what my path has been since losing my husband, Chad. And it's been windy. It's been a windy road, and it's been a bumpy road. It's also been a good road. There are parts that have been really great. So that's the gist, a little brief summary of me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And we'll get into your windy road. I'm sure the listeners are so interested in that. There's something that I was curious about, and I've been following you on social media for a couple of years now, and I've listening to your talks and your podcasts, and one thing that stands out about you to me is the overwhelming positive reception that you've gotten from civilians to high ranking people in the military to total badasses and everyone in between. Everyone loves Sara. I mean, it's just really rare to hear so much positivity with a person. And I started thinking about, I felt the same way, just like, I love this person. And why is that? And you lead with such authenticity and vulnerability and courage. It's like this beautiful mix of feeling the fear and doing it anyway, and really being vulnerable about it's not a perfect road. And there were times where you were lost in the dark woods. And so I'm curious if you could just share with our listeners a little bit about what that journey has looked like for you.
Thank you. That was very kind to say. I have wondered sometimes, living this story louder than other people. I realize I may not be everybody's cup of tea, but I think that's just who I am. I'm just kind of say it like it is type of person, and I'm pretty honest. I think the vulnerability piece comes from it just hurts, and there's really no way to cover that up. The way I love and still love him, and the way I feel so strongly that I would have done anything to protect him, I voice that because of that love. And when you lose someone and they're not here to give that love to, what I learned is the only thing I can do is take the love I would have given to him and like give it to others. That's kind of how I displace that. And so, coming up on 5 years, I think if your listeners think back on your life the last 5 years and think of all the things that you've done, it's a long time, but it goes by really fast. So in those early days, I just stayed in his closet day and night, primarily. I slept in his closet. I laid in his closet. It was kind of the only place in our house that smelled like him. It was like he was still alive in there. That might sound weird to some people, but if there's anybody listening that has had this loss, I think you completely understand. And I did, we do have two children, and they were 17 and 14 when he died. And I can think back now and think there are ways I could have been a better mom and a more attentive mom, but I was so in my own headspace. Thankfully, I have a ton of friends and a social network. I call it like my social fabric that's woven in, that have stepped in and were supportive, really hands-on in those early days and weeks for my family. But then I kind of really had to look within myself, right? I spent 27 years with this person. And so my problem I found was that if I wasn't his wife, who was I? And that's not to say I didn't have my own interests and hobbies. I'd worked in the fitness industry for 20 years. I had a good job. I was kind of at the peak of my career, so to speak. But we were such a team that I just didn't really know how to do life without him. So the way I did that was I left where we lived a lot. I would travel, and I went to Bali. I rented a camper van and I traveled through the Pacific Northwest for 10 days. And my only rule was to speak to no one. I had 3 conversations in 10 days. I did a very intensive therapy retreat in Tennessee where I worked with a therapist upwards of 6 to 8 hours a day. I did EMDR, which is another type of therapy. I did a surf retreat and went to Costa Rica. I rode my skateboard. I journaled. I wrote a lot. I like to joke that I bought a pet pig. I did. I bought a pet pig. That could be a story for a whole nother time. He was pretty great. But I share this because, and some of the things weren't that great. Like, I found myself avoiding my friends. Like, I would just stay to myself in my house, and they would call or ask me to go do things, and I would avoid them. Or I would binge on a television show and drink a glass of wine and be with no one. And I would drive around in my car for hours, like hours, because it was the only place I felt like you can't really multitask. You have to drive and you're with your thoughts. And it just allowed me to kind of be in this safe bubble where I wasn't with people, I kind of felt like I was a walking road rash, is what it felt like. And I felt like people could see how bad I hurt. I used to go, because I would avoid people, I would put headphones in and I would just go to stores, Home Depot, Target, wherever. And I'd walk around because I felt like I needed to maybe be around people, but I didn't really want to have to talk or engage with people. So while I talk about those trips, there were definitely the adverse sides that were not really great coping mechanisms. And I had done some work with another nonprofit and they had made a video. And I was on this van trip in the North Pacific Northwest. And the video, as the internet does, kind of went viral. And it felt so hard to see people see me like that, crying and upset. But I remember laying on a picnic table in the redwoods, and I just thought, I have to carry this forever. This is like part of my story. I didn't get to pick it. So if I'm going to carry it, I'm going to try to make that load a little lighter by sharing it. And if I share it, then maybe more people will understand, some of the struggles that people have, that everybody struggles at some point in time, maybe to different extremes, maybe because of different impulses played on their life. So I wanted to talk about that. I was hoping to do it so that specific, like for our veterans, they would also recognize like kind of the path of destruction they would leave in their absence. Most of the research I've read and done that when people make that decision to take their life, they kind of echo the same sentiment, is that they're doing something good for their family. They're alleviating a burden. They see themselves as less than or not worthy. And obviously that's a thought within them. But man, if Chad only knew how many people really struggle with him not being here anymore. So that's where it's gone. And then it's all been very organic. And stop me at any point if you have a question. But
Well, I would like to just jump in and kind of summarize for the listeners what I'm hearing as your resources, as you were just kind of moving organically through your impulses to be around people or not be around people. But one of the things that jumps out to me was the social support. So letting people help you, because you did have a choice to say, leave me alone, like I need to be alone. And then kudos to your friends for actually stepping in and doing something. Like thoughts and prayers are not helpful at all.
no.
I mean, I guess they're kind, but get in there, take my kids to school, bring over some food, make sure my house is clean. Like those types of things are very necessary. So your friends, then letting yourself be around people, and also when you needed to be alone and isolate and zone out, like dissociation is a beautiful gift that we have in the human nervous system to kind of numb us when it's too much. So letting yourself move into those points without shame or without overly beating yourself up, the forced social connection of putting on headphones, like, the titration of, I can't really be up for a conversation with people, but I'd like to be around people.
Mm-hmm.
And so encouraging yourself to get out there, trying every therapy or every retreat that appealed to you of like, let me try this, let me try this. There were certain things that probably hit really well and others like, oh, I never want to do that again. But just letting yourself be with that. And then the driving is, I don't know if it was a dissociation or a mindfulness for you, but it sounded like a mindfulness of, I need to have my hands on the wheel. I need to pay attention. I need to be in this moment because it's too hard to drive a car and be anywhere else. So, there was a mindfulness aspect to that. So there were so many things that your system was moving toward organically, that, people can invite into their own lives too. Those are all great mechanisms for healing.
Yeah, I would say at the time, I don't think I really knew, there was no real plan. It was just like, I will say I've had a fantastic therapist the last 5 years. And I like to joke, if I could just like make her tiny and stick her in my pocket and take her with me everywhere, it'd be great, because she's just so valuable to me, and the insight that she's taught me, right? It isn't just this conversation between her and I, and she's saying, why do you do that? Why don't you do this? She asks me questions and challenges me so that I've been able to be very introspective and be like, oh, well, that's why I do that. Okay, well, how could I do this differently? And it's been really helpful. It's never lost on me the people I have in my life, which naturally makes me think of my husband because I don't think he saw his life that way. And it's a lot of what I speak to now of just how much people need people. I cannot force that enough. People need people. You might be someone who maybe you don't need 100 friends, but you need three or four solid go to people. Or maybe you're the person who has, these little pockets of people everywhere. However it fits, but it's never lost on me. I had an entire, military community. I have a very supportive family. I have two amazing children who are incredible. I have an entire gym population from my old job. I mean, and what that really gave me too is my ability to seek out different populations of people depending on what I was either craving or needing. And that might sound really selfish, but sometimes you need different things, right? Sometimes you need that quiet friend with a cup of coffee, or sometimes you need that workout buddy to sweat with, and whatever it is for you. And I've mentioned this a few times, but because of my gym community that I was a part of, I would go into the gym and I wouldn't work out, but I would just want to be there. I would just want it's kind of like my own personal church, right? It's where I feel the most like me after Chad. And my friends all there were very protective, and they'd kind of just be around me. And I remember one day someone's like, "Hey, how you doing? Just how you doing?" And I remember looking at them and I thought, how much do they want me to answer that question right now? Like, how much do you want to know? And I don't think they meant anything mean or rude by it, but clearly they knew what had just happened in my life. And I said to another friend, I don't think we should ask people that question anymore. And she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I think we should ask people, how are you doing today?" And she said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, because if you say today, it opens up the freedom for the person to either have a good day or a bad day, but they're not confining themselves to just an overall feeling indefinitely." And it just gave me a little bit more freedom. And she did. From then on, she has always asked me, "How are you doing today?" And I can say, "You know what? It was a pretty great day. I had a really great run. I did this, I did that." But it also gave me the freedom to go, "I'm really not doing so good."
I love the nuance of that. It really frees you up to be more honest about how you're feeling. It's like, do I sacrifice myself to make this person comfortable? Do I tell them how I'm really feeling? And I just love that. How are you feeling today? With the option of like, tomorrow might really suck. And I might need to be able to tell you, I'm having a real hard day today. I don't want to commit to feeling better. Like, don't rush me into my healing. I'll get to my healing when I get to it.
Yeah. It's what I've tried to implement, at least in my life. And whether the person answers, with that or not, that's their choice. But just let's give each other the freedom to have a good day and a bad day and then move on, because tomorrow could be different.
And I think that's beautiful. And I think it goes into what Michelle was saying with you leading and living with courage and being so authentic. Transforming that question gives you the ability to answer authentically. When somebody asks you that, this isn't like hey, just how are you? I'm good. Okay, bye. This is, do you want to know the answer? And I'm going to tell you, and I need to be able to give you my authentic answer. And I think that's something a lot more people need to be empowered to do, is take back that power and be authentic, especially when you're going through a situation like this.
Yeah. It's not always easy.
You make it look easy. I know it's not easy. I've seen you talk about times where you've treated others with grace, where they maybe didn't deserve grace, but they said, "Oh, what's going," or you were at Chad's grave and somebody came up and said, "Oh, and you said he died by suicide." And the person kind of was a little clunky with that. And you gave this person a lot of grace. And you've talked about how you had no other choice but to love people, but to open your heart. And I will challenge you on that. We always have a choice. I've seen plenty of people that have shut down their hearts, that have said, "I will never love again. Leave me alone. I'm going into my cave." Just shut it down and lock down the heart because it's so painful. And I think that's one of the most courageous things that you've done is continuing to invite yourself to open, to soften, to move that energy through, because love is energy and energy can't be created or destroyed. It just moves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it speaks so much to your love for Chad, the way that you have surged that energy forward through your heart to move forward with courage. And how do you do that? Was there like a point where you decided like, I'm going to do this, or how do you get to that point,
Well,
Sara?
I should back up and say in the early days, and it really doesn't happen much anymore, that walking road rash that I was, people would say stuff and I would just like lash out. And what I felt, my brain kind of works in these analogies all the time. And I just felt like, when you overfill a balloon and it just gets too big, you have to pinch the sides of the balloon and let a little bit of the air out. And that's what I realized I was doing. I was like holding in all this stuff. And then someone would make a dumb comment like, well, why did he do that? I don't know. Was it just all that the guy at his headstone in Arlington said, what was the problem? He just couldn't handle the things he'd seen. It's like those kind of flippant comments. And I did give that guy grace. But with the people I lashed out at, it was like I was just letting some of the air out of the balloon. But it also comes back to my own thought is that I will carry this forever. And if I lash out at people, one, I just don't feel like that's honoring who I am as a person. It didn't make me feel better. Two, more than likely, people just don't know. I mean, there's been plenty of things that I've probably said and done that might have been hurtful, and I just didn't know the difference. And there are times when I take a moment to try to educate them on what was said and how it's wrong. One of those is I don't want people to say commit suicide. I'm trying to really change that language. And then other times, you just kind of have to weigh in your mind, like, is this worth it? Right? Is the battle worth it? There's been plenty of rude and insensitive things said. I think in the back of my mind, I always think, and maybe this is part of the vulnerability piece, is that have been hurt so deeply by his loss, and there are cuts that still get me on the regular, that there's really nothing else that could hurt me. So being vulnerable is not scary because, it can't hurt me more than that. So I guess I just hope to educate people so that we can change the number and the statistic, but also the stigma and the thoughts that come with it.
And you're doing so much to achieve that. And I'm curious about your Step Up Foundation. That was founded just a year after Chad's death. And how did the idea for that occur to you? Or tell me a little bit about the creation of Step Up Foundation.
Some people may know or may not know, but I spoke at Chad's funeral. And, I spoke at his funeral, which was very hard to do. But I did that because I just felt like I knew him best. And there was a part of me that I didn't know who would step up and speak for him because he was such a quiet guy. And in there, I shared this workout that he did to train. He was this hobby alpinist. He liked to climb mountains. And organically, people kind of took to this workout and wanted to do it. Great. I thought that's great. And then I was approached by GoRuck, another company, to kind of formulate this workout and get people to do it. And I said, okay, great. And we pressed forward, but the thought process back to that picnic table in the Redwoods was just like, well, if I could use this story for good, then it will be worth it, right? Chad was such a quiet guy. I don't know how he would feel about a workout in his name, but the point was we're going to use it for good. And now, the workout goes around the globe. It's on Veterans Day. It is the annual Veterans Day hero workout with CrossFit from here on out. And so it's 1,000 step-ups with a 45-pound pack. And so the Step Up Foundation was formed because of the name of that workout, but really just a matter of we need to step up for our veterans. Oftentimes our workouts for the fallen are done on their death anniversary date, and Chad died October 29th. But I prefer people to do it on November 11th, which is our Veterans Day, as a testament. Yes, Chad is just one of 30,000 veterans lost to suicide. Veterans Day is about our current veterans. And I want people to recognize like we still need to step up and honor them, whether we are at war or not at war, and what they've given, what they've sacrificed for our freedoms and the hardships they go through in their service. What I'm starting to see now, though, is this has the ability to be a much bigger platform for just the general population, too. And, I think as far as the workout goes, it's a little poetic in that anybody can do step ups and you don't have to do the weight. But it's really about it's going to take you an hour to do. And what are you going to think about in that hour? Where does your mind go? What are the hard things you've faced? Do you know a friend that's having a hard time? How could you better support them? Who are the people that you enjoy having in your life? Are they with you, next to you, on the box? So it's really been, as strange as it is to say, like a beautiful thing. And then the Step Up Foundation is now pressing forward with what we call Live Big events. And so Live Big kind of became my life motto after Chad. And it's just this concept of I want to experience everything life has to give me, the good, the bad, the everything in between. And people are often asked, what's the one thing you would do if you knew you would not fail? And I think the question is, what's the thing you're still willing to do, knowing that failure is an option? Chad did hard things. He liked to do hard things. The harder the physical challenge, the more he wanted to do it. And he instilled that in me of like, just try it, go for it. And there's a lot of empowerment that can happen there, whether you pass or you fail. I like to call it the curves and the cutbacks of life because I skate and I surf. And, the curves are where you pick up momentum, and the cutbacks, well, that's where you learn, right? And you adjust. And the idea behind our Live Big events is challenging people to take on something really hard. And there's kind of this umbrella of benefit. They get to accomplish this task. Step Up Foundation can support them along the way. They can help build this kind of acknowledgement around mental struggles. And hopefully, in turn, we could potentially raise money. We just did our first Live Big event. It was a 10K open water swim in Lake Erie to a lighthouse. It was called Find Your Way Home because lighthouses are symbolic. I wish the world could have been at that event because it was pretty incredible. And it started with one veteran's kind of dream. It was just him going to swim. And it grew into 35 swimmers. We raised almost $100,000. But beyond that, what I saw it do was these 30 some swimmers came together for this challenging swim. We're talking 6 miles. It's in international waters. We had Border Patrol escorting us. We had the police department, fire department, water rescue, kayakers. And then this entire small town came together to support this prior veteran who really had removed himself from a lot of parts of his life. He kind of became, I don't want to say a recluse, and it brought him back together to his community. It reconnected him to his brother and to some of his former teammates that he had. Like, that is cool. That's Live Big.
Wow. That is so powerful. Just bringing in a member of the tribe or the herd. We're not meant to heal in isolation. In fact, it's impossible. It just can't happen. So that bringing in of the community to help this one person that ended up ripple effect, helping so many people, that when we help one, we help all of us.
Yeah, I think some people in the specific to maybe the veteran space, in the space that I'm in, they kind of roll their eyes and they get frustrated how much I talk about we need to work together as a team. But I see that so strongly. We need to work together to fight against veteran suicide, and other organizations need to work together to reduce the stigma for others who are suffering. Like, you got to lean in. We got to get people to lean in to one another.
Absolutely. And with that, Sarah, you're so involved in this. Where are we failing? I spent 20 years in the Air Force. My husband is in the Navy. What do you think about this? The stats are up. Suicide is up overall, but where are we fundamentally failing?
Well, I've had talks with military leadership. I've went and talked to SOCOM. I've talked to some congresswomen. I'm a military kid, remember? Like my dad was a colonel in the Marine Corps. I am like wrapped in the fabric of the American flag. And what I know is the military sees a problem and they want to know what the fix is. And I just don't think there is one fix. And so if suicide is kind of this umbrella issue, they want to know what's the one thing we can do to go fix X, Y, and Z, these people. I don't think it works that way. The brain is incredibly complex, not to mention like someone's emotional state, not to mention what happens to them before they join the military. What things are they bringing with them from childhood? It's a complex problem. And I'm worried that if we're always deferring and waiting for the military, the VA, TRICARE, other health organizations to fix it, we're going to be waiting forever. I think it's really a matter of looking at the people that have lived it. And I don't mean just me, I'm talking the other military spouse, survivors of suicide. Those to me are going to be the best advocates and kind of workhorses to push treatment options forward. That's one thought. The other problem, and people aren't going to like when I say this, is it's back to what I said. The organizations that are coming up with treatment options and or fundraising, they want to be the fixers. They want to be the hero of the story. That's not how it works either. It's about creating a team so that you can look at organizations and say, what do you do? Are you biotesting them and tracking sleep patterns and helping them with their sleep apnea? Are you helping treating their TBI and offsetting that? How are you doing that through MERT and stellate ganglion block? How are, plant medicine, meditation, yoga? The list is long, but I think the sooner we can better understand who does what that's a viable treatment. And I like to say, don't talk about it, be about it. Who's really in this game so that when veterans come to us, I mean, I field calls pretty regularly. I was on a call this week. There was a veteran in crisis. I had a long conversation with his wife. I am not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a researcher. I'm not a therapist, but I am someone who's lived it. And I will do everything in my power to help find a path to help you go down this road. Right. So it's in some ways, it's about kind of giving up on the VA and the military treating the problem. It's about those of us in the fight. It's about understanding who's in the fight for the right reasons. And then it's about helping our people down a path, but they have to be able to make those decisions for their own care. So then it's about educating what I always say, the spouse and or the first responder. Not everybody's married, but who's the person in your life that we can help educate so they understand why you do the things you do, your signs and symptoms, and how can we start to support those?
I think that, no, it was so good. And practically speaking, if somebody was listening that's supporting a veteran or active duty that they're starting to say, oh gosh, I think my loved one's in trouble, what would you say if you spoke directly to them? What do you wish you would have known back then of how to support?
I would try to encourage them to do a couple things. And the first is maybe start to make a list of signs and symptoms and frequency when they see them. You could tell your person about it, or maybe you don't tell them, depending on the temperament or the dynamic of your relationship. But that at least will start to just give you some history. How long, how often are they not sleeping? How long, how often do they have headaches or blurred vision or lose their balance or agitated, lash out, whatever symptoms they have? Second, I would try to encourage them to almost like triage. You go into a hospital, someone has a broken bone, someone has a paper cut. Who do you treat first? Try to think, and each person is their own individual. So, where is their biggest struggle? Is it their sleep? Is it their nutrition? Is it just their lack of exercise? I'm not sure. And maybe try to see how you can help or support the one largest glaring symptom or problem. And third, I would probably say, you do need to reach out. And so that could either be a fellow spouse or friend that you might be able to just kind of unload some of these feelings. Maybe look for a therapist in your area. Step Up Foundation gave a very large donation last year to Sound Off, which does support military, but it provides them access to a therapist or a battle buddy in their state. It is completely anonymous and it encrypts their data. So that is almost like the quickest reaction for someone struggling to have a therapy session. That's where I'd start. The list can get pretty long. And sometimes this might seem extreme, but it is a matter of specific to our military members. Many of them do have firearms. So understanding where those firearms are located, how can you separate the ammunition from the weapon, also hiding or putting away problematic medicine. Those are just preventative measures that at least could help in the immediate if you were to that level. And really only you can decide if it's to that level.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are hesitant to bring up suicide. They think they might put the idea in somebody's head, or maybe they'll cause them to act if they start talking about it. And what we know is that there's absolutely no correlation between talking about suicide and people actually completing. Do you have any suggestions on the average person to talk with their loved one about suicide, or how you might bring that up?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I've talked about this too, because I can see how people would think, if I say that to them, have you thought about taking your life, or have you thought about suicide? They think they might plant the seed. And it's exactly as you mentioned, there's no research that supports that. It's a hard question to ask. And I've had to ask it, not of Chad, of someone else. But when you ask that question, how they answer it matters. If they said yes, that's important to know. If they say no, that's also important to know, because how they say that perhaps will give you insight as to really where their headspace is. So I can't stress enough, if you are to that point where your gut, just inside, that gut feeling is like, I don't feel right about this, we do want you to ask them. I want you to look them straight in the face and really listen to the answer they give. It's hard to do, but I don't want to say you'll be grateful, but it's just like we talked about before about the support for the grieving. People want to step away and give space. And this is the time in our lives where you really have to kind of insert yourself in someone's life.
Yes. And I know there's people that are listening that are on the other side of it. They might be the active duty or the veteran that has had those thoughts, and they feel pushed into a corner and without options. So if you could speak directly to those people, what do you want them to know?
It's my belief that the biggest barrier of care for specifically our military is that it would be a flag on their service. Leadership has come back and said that's not true. I'm even sitting here today saying, I'm not sure I really believe that. And so it really goes to, I feel like I keep repeating myself, but it really goes to, finding that one person you can lean into. We're working right now to create a stronger sense of resources on our website, the Step Up Foundation, because there's a lot of avenues you can take. Perhaps it is talk therapy or working with a therapist or EMDR. Maybe it is a more integrative technique such as MERT or ganglion block or other treatments for TBI or brain injury. And then we have this host of what I call experiential therapy. You can fish and ride a boat and shoot a gun and be on a horse all day long, but no one is meant to struggle alone. I think it's like we have to bring humanity back. And I just want to normalize people saying like, I'm not doing so good. Maybe that's what it is. You just have to say, I'm not doing so good, and lean on someone else to help find you the path of care.
And I think that goes back to what you said in the beginning, when somebody actually asks you, how are you today? Being able to actually answer them authentically and say, I'm not doing good today.
Yeah.
Because we all know tomorrow can be different. It can be much better, right? But it opens up that path to having somebody help you.
It is a little bit, if we're going to go big scope, because obviously there's a lot of your listeners who are not military and they are civilians and they still have their own struggle and hardship. Is that, again, I feel like people are going to say, whoo, she's like woo-hooey. But by bringing humanity back, it means that you have to take some ownership too when you ask that question, right? You look someone in the eye and say, how are you doing today? You got to be ready for whatever they say back to you. And then how are you going to support that? I mean, I would put that out as a challenge to all of your listeners, is for the next couple days or week, or maybe for the rest of your lifetime, you're more intentional when you look someone in the eye and you say, "How are you doing?" You say, "How are you doing today?" And you really wait for their answer. It's hard. It's hard, but it's good.
Yeah, I think sometimes people don't know what to say and they make it worse. So if I say, I'm really struggling, I'm having dark thoughts. You're scaring me. What's going on? Do we need to let's call the crisis hotline. There's this overreaction. So it's like, well, shit, I'm not going to share that again. Like, I don't need that type of response.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it definitely backfire. But then I also wonder, if someone asked you honestly, "How do you feel today?" And that came out of my mouth, maybe it would help me to recognize, like, wow, I didn't realize I was feeling that bad. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know what the perfect answer is. I just think it's a mix for me. The way I choose to walk this path is, I think I could spin my wheels for the rest of my life fighting against military leadership to change the way they do things. And I've learned that I like to work smarter, not harder. And there's only so much of that I'm going to do. But what I can do is I can share my story and some of my experiences and things that I've learned, so that it allows others to think about their own life and the way they carry things or the way they choose to carry things. And I do feel strongly in that concept of challenging people to live big, to kind of become, on the challenge coin, it says, "Together we can do hard things," to challenge them to do hard things, because it has, just like suicide, this ripple effect of empowerment for the good and for the good of others.
Yeah. And sometimes finding those people that do receive us well when we say, I am having the worst day, finding those people that can hold it with us and just say, man, that's heavy, without trying to fix it or, rush into action, that we can just sit in the muck with and be there together. It makes it a little less mucky to know that we've got company in there. There's this meme I love. It said, when you can't look at the bright side, I'll sit with you in the dark. And I just think that's so powerful, to have people that can sit with us in the dark and to be able to sit with others in the darkness, knowing that the light will shine again in its own time.
Yeah, I can't say enough the people I had in my life, and that they would just come and, I mean, they would just say, like, I remember at one time my girlfriend was just sitting on the couch and she looks at me and she goes, "This really sucks." And I was like, yes. And it felt good to have her say that to me, because you feel like you're just alone in it, but you kind of want someone to recognize and validate that pain.
Yeah, it's really important.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story. I think our listeners are going to be inspired and empowered, and hopefully they feel like they're not alone. And hopefully you've given them some tips and some resources. I think it's been such a beautiful story, how you've transpired your love for Chad, and you're giving it all of this love back and sharing all of this energy into the world. I think it's amazing, and I think it's important from our veteran community, obviously. So we appreciate it very much, your work.
Well, thank you for everything you guys are doing. You're doing great work out there too. So I appreciate your time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Sophia Health is all about the preventative measures that you mentioned, right? There's a lot of different avenues out there, but I think it's first and foremost critical for people to reach out, and then have those different opportunities and paths available to them to get support, whatever that support looks like for you, whether it's the fishing or the therapy, the aromatherapies, the coaching, and everything in between. I think it's really important. But before you leave us, a question we ask all the guests on the show is, can you share 3 fundamental pillars or elements that contribute to your daily well-being?
My children, obviously, are number one, in terms of just, it's probably a lot of pressure. And I haven't told them this, that they saved me. And one day I'll be able to tell them, but like, they saved my life, I think. My friends, again, that social fabric. And like I said, I ride my skateboard a lot. That is therapy to me. So I don't know if those are the type of things you were expecting me to say, but when I ride my skateboard is when I feel ultimately free. And I hope there are people out there that can find your thing, whatever it is, that makes you feel free. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. Michelle, any other thoughts from you?
I'm just curious, how can people get involved with the Step Up Foundation? Where can they find you on social media? And, if they want to live big with you, how do
Yeah.
they do that?
We are on Instagram, Step Up Foundation, and LinkedIn. Our website is www.stepupfoundation.org, or you can email info@stepupfoundation.org. If you're curious about looking into our future activities, if you want to participate in Chad 1000X, you can register on that website, chad1000x.com. Those will probably be the best starting points. Reach out and join in.
Sara, thank you. It has been such an honor. Thank you for being so generous with your time with us this morning.
Thank you so much. This has been great. Hope you guys have a good day.
Thanks so much for listening. This has been Sophia Unfiltered, a podcast by Sophia Health, the #1 marketplace for health and wellness. Find services, classes, and products from the top health and wellness providers. Book an appointment or join live classes now. I'm your host, Riley Reese. If this episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear about it in the comments section of your favorite podcast provider or with a 5-star rating. Let us know what your biggest takeaway from this episode was, or share it with someone you hope to inspire. Join us again next time for more real conversations, stories, and insights that help empower you with the knowledge and inspiration needed to transform how we care for ourselves.